Welcome back to the Buttoned Up Podcast. We're joined today by Barnett Holston, aka the DC Fashion Fool. Barnett, how's it going?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
Doing well. Yeah, we've known each other for a few years now. I think we met. Well, actually, we can't remember because we have different versions of this, but we met at some sort of blogger like press event in DC. I think it was either Indochino or Blank Label or something.
I know it was the grooming lounge. It
The
was
grooming lounge, right? The grooming lounge. And then we got to hang out at the Menfluential conference a couple times. We actually saw each other kind of recently at the Menfluential conference, and it's been really cool to see your brand grow and to see what you're doing with the DC men's fashion community. But our listeners really like to get into like who you are and why you started your brand. So if you could just tell us like, where'd you grow up and what were you doing before the DC Fashion Fool?
sure. I grew up in DC. I'm from DC, hence DC Fashion Fool. That's how I got my name. I I went to school for finance. Moved away for a couple of years, hated it, and moved back to DC. So I've always been in finance or in banking, and that's kind of pretty straightforward and things like that. But I always had this kind of passion for learning about fashion and things like that. So I bluffed my way into writing about fashion for a couple of publications. And next thing you know, people were asking me about my style and where I found things. And so I just decided, hey, why not do it? And I went to Fashion Week and I went with one of my friends, and she said, nobody's ever going to read a blog or follow your Instagram unless you get in front of a camera. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. That kind of sucks. And next thing you know, one of my pictures got picked up by Saks, and here I am.
Wow, that's awesome. Wait, where did you move when you moved away?
Well, I went to school in Delaware. I lived outside of Philly for about a year and a half.
Okay, okay, and then you came back to DC, and that's home.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, I grew up in outside of DC in Silver Spring, so very much a Mid Atlantic East Coaster as well. Um, when you first started, when was this? Are we like in the mid 2000s or when was this?
Well, I had a blog for a long time, and I was actually talking to a friend the other day, and she said she's been blogging since 2010. I went back and looked. My first blog post was 2005.
Wow.
It nothing, no pictures. It's just I think maybe it's like a 30-second read. And I went back to read it to see if it still held up. It's still okay, so I'm all right with that.
Yeah, I mean back then like there weren't since Instagram wasn't a thing and even pre YouTube like content wasn't so media rich, so like a lot of it was just writing even in like the men's fashion space. So I think that was kind of normal.
Yeah, it's just basically what I said is like, hey, I like fashion. I want to talk about it. This is just my musings and just follow along. And I don't say that I was really active, not a lot of content, maybe once a month or, whenever I felt like it, sometimes more heavier than not. And, the only people that read it was my family and like maybe a couple friends.
Yeah, that's how it starts. Why were you into fashion in the first place?
I don't know. I think I kind of got it from my parents. My mom was she'll deny it to her dying day, but she did a little bit of modeling, and she was always kind of attuned to it. And my dad was pretty, I mean, not so much fashion oriented, but always concerned about how he looked and the care of his clothing. I can remember, like every Saturday, all the shoes that he wore, he would get them out and polish them. And he taught me and my brother how to polish our shoes and stuff like that. Not that I wouldn't cheat and sneak mine in his closet and let him polish them for me, but, it was stuff like that. I mean, he was fanatic about things like that. I mean, he had so his shoes, certain brands he would wear. He never wore the same ones, over the next day. He would always switch shoes. They were always in shoe trees. And I kind of looked at that. And then my mom was, she was very fashionable. I remember I remember I saw when I was in, I don't know, elementary school or high school or something, I saw one of my teachers had the same dress on. My mom's like, I'm putting it in the Goodwill. And she did the next day. And she was like, always count the number on the rack. That means there's too many if there's a lot.
Yeah, she sounds like a fun mom.
Yeah, she's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and I mean your style, I'd say for contemporary standards is definitely a little bit dressed up. Do you think that comes from your parents?
Yeah, pretty much. My dad had a 9 to 5 when he was working, and so he wore a suit every day. And then in church on Sunday, he had a suit. My mom, always pretty fashionable, but she was. My mom worked too, and when I grew up, a lot of the women in my neighborhood, they were all stay-at-home moms. So my mom would wear like weird stuff to church. I remember that, and everybody would always kind of look at my mom crazy, but then they would all copy her style. And I always thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, funny how that works with guys too. Your friends will kind of give you a little flack when you start stepping up your game, and then next thing you know, they're asking you what kind of suit they should wear for their wedding.
Yeah, or where'd you get that? Or how could I find that? That happens all the time.
All right. Okay, so you started the DC Fashion Fool blog. You were just writing. You went to your first New York Fashion Week, and a friend convinced you to take some pictures, and then one got picked up by Saks.
Yeah, it's on Instagram. I bought this coat. It came from Billy Reed. I'll never forget it. I still wear that coat. And I was just kind of, how they do like the best looks of Fashion Week or street style or something like that. I'm looking and I'm like, here I am. They didn't know who I am. It's like, here's this dude in this coat we love, and it was pretty cool. It's pretty boss.
That's awesome. And so was that like a game changing moment for you?
It was just a way to say, hey, maybe I should do this, because before I would just, if there were any pictures on the blog, I would, I was clipping them from wherever I could find them, or I would go into stores around the area and it's like, hey, this is what I like for spring, and take the pictures off the mannequins and stuff like that. And, that's how I did it. But, nobody really paid attention. And then it's around that time, Instagram was starting to be really big, and there were some big players. And I said, hey, why not I try to do it? Instead of showing, the 3 pairs of shoes that I saw at some store, why don't I show myself in those shoes?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It is, as you know, it's a whole different level of effort when you start including photos, original photography in your content, and especially if you want to have original photos for Instagram on a regular basis. Like how did that work? Did you just have friends that were handy with a camera, or did you take selfies, or what?
God, I'm trying to think. Fortunately, I think maybe I did a couple selfies right away, but in DC around that time, a lot of the girls were doing a lot of stuff on Instagram, and I was friends with a whole bunch of them. So I would get them to take my pictures. So it was pretty smart, right away. One of them said, get this camera. And all the girls had the same camera. So if I brought my camera, they could just shoot me, and I would have my disc when I was ready to go home. And then I just fumbled around editing.
Nice. Yeah, it seems like the women's fashion scene was definitely more prevalent, especially in DC, before the men caught on.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's so saturated and so grown that there are all these groups around, but they've all splintered because they all hate each other now. But it's pretty interesting. So I would just be friends with all of them and just learn all their secrets. I remember when I decided that I was going to do it. One of the girls was like, hey, we have this weekly blogger group, come join us. And every day, it was every Tuesday, you did stuff from 12 to 4, and they would say, okay, this is what SEO means, this is how you take a picture, this is what you should put in your blog. And I just stole all that stuff from them.
Yeah, that's yeah, but it's all that stuff like SEO. I mean, that's stuff that if you're interested in fashion, and you start a fashion blog. That's stuff that no one tells you unless you seek it out, or unless you have friends that are also in the industry.
Dude, it's crazy. I am. I'll never forget, we were sitting there. It was about me and a buddy of mine. There was us and maybe like 8 girls, and we are all. One of them was like a drill sergeant. She's like, "You guys can't goof off. You've got to like put out content." And we're like, "Oh yeah, yeah." And another girl goes like, "And check your SEO." And we're like, "SE what?" You know?
Yeah.
And then they're like, and then I'll never forget that. And then she's like, "All right, get this plugin and go to get this Yoast plugin." I'm like, "Okay, I can make the light green. That's not that hard."
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It's funny because that same stuff still works these days.
Yeah, you have. It's crazy. You don't. I mean, you think you have something to say, whether people like it or not, but you think you have a voice and you want to do that. But then there's all this behind the stuff scenes that you have to do, because you think, all right, even with an Instagram post or with whatever it is, you're just like, I'm going to put out this great content. Everybody's going to love it. Everybody's going to read it. And everybody's going to just fawn over it. But then you put it out there and it goes nowhere. And you're like, oh, crap, there's all this other stuff I have to do to get eyes on it.
Right. Yeah. Creating, good content, whether it's written or photography, video, that's just the first part. And then you have to promote the content.
Yeah, that's the one thing I never even thought about it. It's just like, all right, even with an Instagram picture, you're like, this is my best picture, and everybody's gonna love it. And you put it up and it does crappy, and then you put up something really crappy that does really well, and there's all these other things that fall into play that you have to think about that I never really thought about when I first started.
Yeah. Well, you were writing, well before Instagram was a thing or popular. So when Instagram first came out, did you like immediately see the potential and just jump right on it?
No, not at all. It was funny because um, I had a couple of friends who were doing it. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it, whatever. And I remember I was tweeting and I don't have a huge Twitter following. I don't do it as well as I probably should. But I would tweet out, okay, this is my outfit of the day. I would tweet it out, sometimes with a picture, sometimes not. And then a friend of mine was putting his stuff on Instagram. And then you know how competitive we get. All of a sudden he had like, I'll never. He had like 5,000 followers, and I had like maybe 30. I'm like, there's no way he can have more followers than me, and it just became a competitive thing. And so it was probably the wrong reasons, but it got me started, and that's kind of what did it.
Hey, whatever motivates you, competition can be a great motivator.
Oh yeah, and I still have that competition with him too. So
Nice. Yeah. And I mean, Instagram for you now is definitely one of your big platforms. So that seems to be a platform that you're very like bullish on and investing a lot of time and energy into.
yeah, but I think that I'm gonna start doing some other things. I'm trying to reinvent, not so much reinvent, but work on my blog a little bit more because it's something that I own and I can control. Last week when Instagram went down and Facebook went down, it was kind of scary. Fortunately for me, I was kind of slow that day, so it didn't really affect me that much.
Yeah.
But seeing all these people panic and stuff like that, I'm like, well, you should have a blog, you should have a mailing list, you should do that stuff. And people are like, what? I'm like, trust me, you need that stuff.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that when John and I got to join you in DC and talk to the DC Dapper dudes about online marketing and audience building. That was one of the themes for that day. Definitely was like focus not only on platforms like Instagram but also platforms that you own, like your website and your email list, because you can't ever fully rely on someone else's platform.
100%. And it's really interesting here that you mentioned the DC Dapper dudes. One of the things that I found was that in DC, for some of the opportunities that come up, I was hearing from some brands and stuff. It's like, oh, we don't work with people out of DC. I'm like, well, I know you do because I know people that work with you. And then like, well, there's not a whole lot going on. So I decided that I would scour all of Instagram, scour everything, see who was doing stuff, and kind of bring the guys together to start doing things. But it's good and it's bad because you have people that are really good. There's people that are are a lot more successful than me, but there's some that are up and coming, and just to try to show a group of guys so brands are interested in has been kind of fun. But there's also some downsides along with it too. So if you want to take that on, that's just another element that I've been working on.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because like you mentioned earlier in the women's fashion community, it's oftentimes there's like a lot of competition, a lot of like secrecy about who people are working with and what they're charging, and you've kind of taken the opposite approach with the men's style community in DC, and you're sort of bringing people together and fostering transparency, and I think it's really cool because I've even seen just over the past year you really putting DC on the map. So how that's obviously like a lot of work. So like what is the goal for you with the DC Dapper dudes?
Well, I'm always of the opinion that a rising tide lifts all boats.
Mhm.
So that was one of the things that I wanted to do. I wanted to say, all right, there are a group of guys that are doing some things. Some of them, like I said, maybe advanced, some of them might not, but they all have unique styles, unique content. And if a brand comes in and says, I want to work with people in DC, there's a group of people that they can work with. That being said, it it's good. Like I said, it's good and it's bad because some people think that if an opportunity comes up, there can only be one. And I've learned that people look at my stuff and they say, "Oh, he works with this brand." And instead of trying to work with the brand with me or in conjunction with me, there's like, "Oh, you should use me instead of him." So there's that level of competition that's still around. Maybe not so much as with the it's kind of like that Highlander view. There can be only one sometimes,
Yeah.
and which is really kind of bizarre for me because a lot of times things come my way that are not going to be for me. So for instance, I'm bald, so I get a lot of things. It's that blind pitch is like, we love your Instagram, we love your blog, would you work with us? And then you go look at it, and it's for hair products, and I'm like, well, I don't think that's me, but
Yeah.
I have a buddy that can do it, and his stuff is pretty good, so use that. But some people aren't that forthcoming about sharing, so that's a hard lesson to learn, and I've learned to kind of factor it and being a little more smart about how I put out stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You've worked with some major brands. What was like the first brand that you worked with, either for trade or for payment, where you thought, oh, wow, I could actually like make some money off this or, do some travel or something like that?
I did a partnership with IW Harper, and that was probably my first big campaign that was paid. It lasted, for about a year and a half, and I was just like, wow, you're going to pay me to do this, and this is all I have to do. But one of the things that I know for myself, it's I'm an over deliverer, and sometimes I found that when I signed my second brand, they kind of took advantage of that. So I'm a little leery about that as well too.
Yeah. I think, well, I don't know if you agree with this, but I think from the outside, people will see this, say, okay, you got paid, X amount to post one picture. Like that seems like too much money for like not enough work. And I think sometimes it feels like that. At least I feel like that too. I'm like, wow, that's like, maybe this took a few hours to do and it was like a good amount of money. But if you really think about it, the brands aren't paying for that one picture. They're paying for that audience, which took years and years of hard work to build. So I think you gotta, keep that in mind, just how valuable your audience is, right?
Yeah, you have to think about that. And then, so I shot a picture. I forgot who it was for, but and it was only for an Instagram picture. But come to find out that people are now seeing it at Dulles Airport. It's all over New York,
Hmm.
and I only got paid for one picture. So
Yeah.
that's really weird, and that was something that I never really thought about. And the picture was done a while ago, so I mean, not that I was just happy that it was up and I was happy that it was everywhere. But, even now, like somebody came back from New York, he's like, dude, your picture's at the subway station. I'm like, no, I have no idea. It's kind of weird.
That was a good deal for that brand. Yeah, I think one thing that again, kind of like behind the scenes, is like if you have a contract with the brand, and some brands don't have contracts, it's very informal, but some of the bigger brands, especially if you go through an agency, have a contract, and usually in that contract, it signs away all of your rights to the media that you're creating. And if you don't want to do that, then you have to go back and say, hey, I don't like this part of the contract. Like I don't do that sort of thing. If you want licensing, that's an extra cost.
Yeah, you have to think about it. But, it's weird because one of the ones I signed with was with McDonald's. And let me tell you, that contract, you have no rights. But I wanted to work with McDonald's because it was a big name.
Yeah.
So,
And they know that, right?
oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and what I did, it wasn't, I mean, it was, I think for like maybe 3 or 4 months or whatever like that. But I'm like, it was one of those big opportunities that I'm like, well, I'm going to do it. I was just starting out, and I'm like, well, hey, why not? We'll see what happens. So, and
Yeah.
I figured, well, if I'm agreeable, they'll use me a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's true. I mean, there's definitely something to be said for having like a longer lasting relationship and kind of pricing accordingly. But like, how do you, without sharing numbers, but like, how do you figure out what to charge for this stuff? Because there's no like standards.
I don't know. I don't know. I just had to give rates to somebody else the other day, and I'm moving forward because I do a lot of one-off type things, and I
Mm.
want to do more, longer term contracts, and this is for a longer term contract. And so I kind of taken what I do for a one-off and kind of turn it into, well, what happens if I do it for a year? How do you like discount like a one-off post, and instead I'm going to do several over the year? So you kind of have to think of it that way. I can always tell if I priced right. If I price wrong, it's always too low, because basically once you hit that send and they come back yes, it's too low.
Yeah, yeah. When they come back immediately, like, sure, when can you have it? You're just like, should have doubled it. now, now, do you use kind of like a standard like rate card that you send people, or do you just price it based on like how much you want to work with the brand, or do you do it differently every time?
It's a combination of both, probably. I have a standard rate card. I do have that. If I sense that it's going to be a pain in the ass, I'll price like that. Because
Yeah.
sometimes, I got a request the other day. It's like, what are your rates? I'm like, what are my rates? What do you want me to do? They wouldn't tell me. They're like, it's for a long-term contract and we want to work with you, but I don't know if it's going to be Instagram. I don't know if it's posts. I don't know if it's what kind of social media. So I'm just like, okay, here are my rates. And they came
Yeah.
back and they like it so far. So I'm like, all right, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed a lot of brands they'll say, "What are your rates?" And you list them, and they say, "Well, that's too high." I say, "Okay, how about you just tell me your budget, and we'll see. We'll see what I can do for that."
Yeah,
Uh,
that's one way. And once I did that once, and the other time I did it, and they said, oh, it's too high. We can't do it. I'm like, okay, well, thank you. And then like, but we'd love for you to attend our event. And I was like, well, I don't think I'm going to do that. And I didn't hear back from them. And like a month before the event, they said, oh, now we can pay you, and we can pay you more.
hmm. Interesting. Well, yeah. Speaking of events, I mean, you seem to have a great relationship with the press. You've done press travel. You do a lot of events in DC and New York. So, to me, you do a lot of stuff that I think like up and coming Instagrammers especially want to do. They want to do these press trips. They want to be invited to Fashion Week. So, how did you get that relationship with these agencies and with the press?
Two ways. The first, for Fashion Week and stuff, I kind of bluffed my way into and said that I could write. And um, I wrote for this online company that's not in business anymore. They had me send a writing sample, and I wrote for them for about a month. And then I said, hey, I want to go to Fashion Week, and they got me credentialed and got me invites. So I'm like, I went. And it was a really good learning experience, because if you have a blog, yes, you have your own forced deadlines, but here, if you're getting paid, you're legitimately on deadline.
Hmm.
So that forced me, and not to say that I always have that same work ethic all the time, because I do work full time, but like, I think the turnaround time was a pretty long turnaround time. It was 48 hours, but if you go see, I don't know, 16 shows in a day, it's hard to turn around 16 articles that fast.
Yeah.
So that was one way. And then second, again, I go back to the girls who were getting invited to all the events, and they're like, this is what you do. You meet all the PR people, make sure you know all the photographers, and because those are the ones that are snapping the pictures that are ending up in all of the publications. And that's what I did. And I made a conscious effort, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago. If somebody invited me to something, I would say yes and go everywhere and made sure the photographers took my name and took my picture, so
Right.
I could get to these events.
Right.
But
Hey.
that being said, though, it wasn't just to go to the parties. I learned really quickly that I can't. My forte is not what the girls do. It's like, hey, look at this. Look at this jacket. It costs $20. You can buy it on Like to Know It. Follow that. That doesn't work for me. Don't get me wrong. I do that sometimes, because we all like those affiliate links. But
Sure.
I find that it's more like, all right, I'm going to this event. So I have an event coming up. If you look at my Instagram post today, it's the pink tie party's coming up. So I'm like, what am I going to wear? So I'll do something around, this is what you wear for this event. And that's where I find value, because people want to say, all right, I'm doing this around town, I'm going to the theater, or I'm doing this from the weekend, how do I wear it? I'm not going to tell you, maybe not so much about the quality or stuff like that, because people have different price points and people have different interests. They just want to know how to look at something. So that's what I focus, how I do it.
Yeah, so you mentioned using affiliate links. Is that like a significant part of your business?
Not really. I mean, every once in a while I get some money. I don't think for me, guys convert like that. I work with some brands that when they tell you or give you the links, they're like, don't use anything that's on our sale website because it sells out really fast. I'm like, for me, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But I find I look at it more as a tracking for the brands for them to see who's coming through me because I feel like I'm more of an education kind of guy in terms of like, oh, here's a brand you might not have heard of, or this is something I really really like, and guys may not convert it, but they'll go look at it and they'll see it that way. Now, sometimes that's not the case. I know I put up some links for some stuff that's kind of exploded, which has been kind of cool and kind of bizarre because I don't ever expect it, but I don't really expect anything from them. I'll use them if on my website. I'll use the affiliate links to create ads in the ad spaces. So if people click through, I can automatically do stuff. Or like, don't get me wrong though, in all of my blog posts, 9 times out of 10, if it's an outfit post, everything's going to probably be linked. But that's not always the case, and I don't really rely on it.
Right. Yeah, I feel kind of the same way in that it's like a nice kind of supplement, but it's not the bread and butter right now. And I know for some publishers, affiliate marketing is the bread and butter, and so it definitely can be. Um, but yeah, I agree that I don't think guys. I think it's rare for a guy to see like an Instagram story and like swipe up and go buy something. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think if people are swiping up on my stories, it's usually somebody's significant other, their wife or their girlfriend that swiped up and said, "Oh, I like what Barnett's has," and I'll go get it. I know for a fact. I was hosting an event and I wanted to wear a suit for this event, and it's something that I hadn't seen before. And I was on Amazon, and I like this brand that fits me really well that I don't have to get altered. And I mean, it's not really an expensive suit, but all told, the suit cost $41 on Amazon, and so everybody loved it that night. And I think that when they said, "Where'd you get this suit?" I said, "I got it on Amazon. It's a paisley and gray. It's whatever. It's really inexpensive." I think I sold a lot of them because I gave everybody that link and everybody bought it that night. Because
Right.
for less than $50, if it doesn't work out, you don't lose that much.
Yeah. Yeah, I've also seen some success with using affiliate links with like really good sales. I think, most people respond to that because it's time sensitive.
Yeah, one of the good things that talking about the DC Dapper Dudes and groups like that, we all support each other, and so one of the things that we talk about is that we have a group of support right there. So if something's coming up and somebody's looking for something, they'll be like, "Hey, what's your link? I'll use your link," and that kind of helps out as well.
Right, right, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely one of the best ways to you got to remind people to use your affiliate links. A lot of people just don't know. Like, I got to remember that when I make YouTube videos. Like, hey, great way to support the channel is like use the affiliate links in the description because a lot of people don't even know what affiliate links are.
All right, just click my link. There's certain things that people are always going to buy, and if they're not doing it, you might as well say, because you can't really profit off your own links, so you might as well use somebody else's.
Right, right. So when you're working with these big brands like McDonald's, I mean, is that through agencies or do you have a manager? How do you get those big Fortune 500 deals?
Not at the agency level yet. We're
Mhm.
working on that. I've talked to a couple. It's interesting, but I usually do. There's a lot of those little, I don't know, influencer platforms. I get a lot of stuff off of that, and then I get a lot of things off of, "Hey, we've seen you," or "We referred to you by a friend," or something like that, and I kind of go from there.
What's your favorite platform? Because there's so many of them.
Oh God, whichever one pays.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
working one with now, but I mean the contracts are good, but I'm still waiting to get money from them. But if they ultimately pay me, they'll be good.
Right. Yeah, I've done some of those, but yeah, I usually try to go direct when possible. Although it is nice having a platform kind of manage the contract and the deadlines and the payment and all that.
Yeah, but it's weird though because some of them are really not in, brand or influencer focused. They're more on like, I can guarantee you, I have 10 influencers to sell your product, and so they don't really care about, your content so much. It's just like, can you deliver what you said you're going to deliver? So I've gotten into some issue with that because, the brand might not like what I've originally created, and I've had to get pre-approval. But once I get the approval, I've scheduled it to go at a certain time or scheduled to go out on a certain day. But that little middle market guy in between is like, can you post it now? I'm like, dude, it's 3:00 in the morning. Nobody's going to look at it. What's the purpose of it?
Yeah.
So you got to kind of walk that kind of fine line with some of these agencies.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. All right. Well, I would love to run you through the Buttoned Up Rapid Fire series. Of course, we haven't prepared you for this, but are you down?
Yeah.
All right. Short 1 or 2 word answers if you can. Here we go. Oxfords or brogues?
Brogues.
Lifting or cardio?
Both.
All right. Loafers or sneakers?
Loafers.
For fashion, spring, summer, or fall, winter?
Fall, winter.
Nice. Morning shower or evening shower?
Morning.
Jeans, chinos, or trousers?
Trousers.
Nice. Favorite James Bond actor, if you have one?
Sean Connery.
Nice. Classic.
Always.
Notch lapels or peak lapels?
Peak.
All right. And then if you, for suits, navy or charcoal, if you could only have one?
Charcoal.
Charcoal. Okay. And then last question, when you need to get pumped up for the day, what song are you listening to in the shower?
I'm not saying because it's so stupid.
What genre? How about that?
Oh, it's definitely dance. It's definitely dance.
Dance. Okay, cool. Nice. Yeah, no, you did great. Some people struggle with some of those questions, so good answers. And what are you excited about this year? Just to wrap things up with either DC Dapper Dudes, DC Fashion Fool, or anything else that you're working on.
I think for DC Fashion Fool, it's kind of getting into some new areas. I want to do some on-air stuff, a lot more of that. Not so much always so fashion focused, but I'm going to do some stuff on skincare, some stuff on cosmetology, a whole bunch of different new things, but all around trying to focus still on DC though.
Awesome. And we'll link to all the stuff in the show notes, but where can people go to find you online?
All social media, DC Fashion Fool.
DC Fashion Fool. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for listening to the Buttoned Up Podcast, a collaboration between John Shanahan of The Cavalier and Brock McGough of Modest Man, and we will see you next week.